again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, your host today, and here we go with a very straightforward topic. What life experience effed you up the most? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Having to decide to pull my brother from life support because my parents couldn't be bothered to pick up the phone. Update. Wanted to say thanks to everyone for the support. This all happened when I was in my early to mid-20s. I'm now in my 40s. I can say I've gotten through it. My parents are sort of in my life, but at a distance as I slowly cut them out of my life. A lot of trauma from this incident and childhood abuse has been confronted. I took steps to communicate to my mom. My dad suffers from what we suspect is Alzheimer's and doesn't even remember me, a lot of the buggered I carried. This has helped me with my own personal demons since I've never spoken up about it. I hid behind it through jokes and snide remarks. Context: I come from an Asian family, where family comes first, and our dirt is swept under the rug and is avoided. I decided to change that and air out the dirty laundry. Plus, it also wasn't fair to my mom to not understand why I felt the way I did towards her. She needed to know what she did wrong. I wanted to break that cycle of abuse, generational abuse, because I started seeing the same patterns with myself and my own kids, and that scared me. So my relationship with my parents are pretty much non-existent. I'm doing much better, and thanks for the support. FYI, Mom is a classic example of a narcissist. I had a babysitter that abused me when I was 4 years old. She would strangle me, beat me, yell at me, force me to eat dangerous and awful food. My mom found out about her, and she was sent to jail. She got a 5-month sentence. My best friend hanging himself. I looked up to him as the clever and responsible one of us too. His suicide caught me completely off guard. Ended up feeling guilty, alone, and drained from the last bit of youthful, carefree energy I still had in me. In a way, as passing severed that last tie I had with my youth and forced me to grow up. When I was in college, I was really broke. My parents did not support me financially, and I worked 3 jobs, one job 20 hours a week, the other 2 10 hours a week each, plus studied full-time. January of my senior year, after paying my rent, bills, tuition, and buying my textbooks, I had $20 left in my account and 2 weeks until my next paycheck. I didn't have money for food, I didn't know what to do, and I was too ashamed to ask for help. I remember being in the break room at work and smelling everyone's food that they were warming up in the microwave. I've been hungry but never truly felt starving without knowing where my next meal will come from, and it scared me. After barely eating for 3 days, I almost fainted at work. My boss talked to me in private to ask what was going on because she could tell I had been off for a few days, and I just broke down and told her how much I was struggling financially and couldn't afford food. She immediately pulled out her wallet and gave me 2 $20 bills. I felt so ashamed to take that money, but I also felt as though I didn't have a choice. She later also helped me apply for food stamps. Not nearly as awful as some comments here, but I've never felt so helpless in my life. I hope my old boss knows that her act of generosity has impacted me to this day. That $40 saved me. What may seem like a small, inconsequential act by yourself could make all the difference in the world to someone else. Try being kind. We need it. Pulling my wife and daughter out of my car after we got hit by a drunk driver. They were unharmed, but when I asked my wife where my friend in the back seat was, my wife couldn't contain herself and started screaming through her tears. He's dead. He's dead on the center console. I stayed with my buddy and tried to get him to breathe again until the EMS forced me out of the way. He ended up getting life-flighted in critical condition to a nearby city that has a hospital with a pretty damn good reputation for being miracle workers. My wife and daughter made it through safe with just a few bumps and bruises, but I never saw my friend again. I can't unhear the sounds he made or forget the things I saw while waiting for paramedics. Wear your seatbelts and don't drink and drive, please. When I was 16, I played competitive tennis, and I was decent at it. I wasn't going to go pro or anything, but I enjoyed it and held my own in locals. So I entered a tourney for promising youth and did pretty well for myself. However, as the tournament progresses, I noticed that all the other participants had their parents or other family present to show their support. Not so for me. I was just by myself. I got to the semi-finals, which I won, and when the match was over, I saw the other kid's parents immediately comfort him and tell him he did a good job getting that far, a memory that still haunts me to this day. No one ever came to tell me anything like that. I would have happily given up my win to switch places with him anytime. That loneliness I felt from that crushed me worse than any match loss ever could. It demoralized me so much that I stopped entering tourneys soon after that and stopped playing altogether shortly after. Not nearly as bad as some of the truly awful things people have written here, but hey, it's not like we get to pick and choose what F's us up, is it? When I, male, was in 3rd grade, I was raped by my male teacher. It wasn't violent. He obviously planned it. This was in the 80s, and everyone in the class went up to his desk in a line every day and sat on his lap while he checked our assignments. This day, I was asked to stay after for detention for talking during class. It was only me in the room, and I had a worksheet I had to complete to go home, and I needed help. He said I had to come sit in his lap at his desk to get the help I needed. I did, and it was all so fast and unexpected, I didn't know what to do. He talked to me in a way that made it seem like I was consenting, which was impossible, of course. He told me that if I told anyone, that bad things would happen to my mom and dad. I told my mom that evening after I went home, and she told me to just not talk about it anymore. Come to find out, after she died, that she was sexually abused as a child and couldn't deal with it happening to one of her kids, so she just denied it. A few years later in 8th grade, my best friend from grade school asked if that teacher ever touched me because he had abused him too. I said that my mom told me not to talk about it and told him I couldn't talk to him anymore. He shot himself in the face with his dad's shotgun a few weeks later. By the time I kind of came to terms with all this, the teacher had died. He was a celebrated member of the school, church, and community. When I was 16, my parents came to my secondary school graduation. After the ceremony, there was a small reception to take pictures, talk, and say goodbye to teachers and friends, which I had to skip because my dad was in such a bad mood and being so passive-aggressive that it just soured the whole experience. When we got home, my dad yelled and berated my mom for a solid 30 minutes for forcing him to do things he didn't want to, and how it was selfish of us for making him go. My dad and I don't have a good relationship, and I've had a lot of similar experiences with him, including me coming out and him screaming about how it was wrong while openly trying to manipulate my mom onto his side when she was accepting. But out of everything, that graduation incident still stings like a bitch. My second wife faked cancer and tried draining my bank account to buy her kids love. She was actually addicted to smoking meth and hiding it from me. She would withdraw money from my accounts late at night and tell me I did it and couldn't remember. She hid a runaway girl in our house that ended up getting knocked up by her 16-year-old son. The police came to look for her, but she would hide her in the attic. She put Nair in her hair so her hair came out in splotches and said it was from chemotherapy. She sent me a fake letter from her doctor saying I needed to treat her better. It was 6 months of hell after a pretty normal 5-year marriage. My family finally rescued me and took me away to get a divorce. She constantly violated her no-contact order, telling me she was in hospice and had days to live. It's been 5 years and hours of expensive therapy, and I'm finally feeling back to normal. Not surprisingly, she's alive and well, with zero shame. I've just touched on the main events. There were daily toxic, horrible moments too numerous to list. I have had a stepmom since I was 7. I'm 35 now. I had joint custody with my mom and dad's stepmom growing up. I grew up with my stepmom in my life. She was someone I confided in, I trusted, I loved. She had 2 kids with my dad and my half-brothers, who I absolutely consider them my brothers. My relationship was never strong with my dad growing up. He was always in the shadow of my stepmom. She made the decisions. She controlled my relationship with him. I did not know any better growing up. My dad divorced her about 4 years ago now. My dad is a completely different person. He's loving, caring, empathetic, so wholesome, down to earth. My stepmom robbed me of seeing that side of him. Coming to the realization that she controlled my dad and withheld him from me has been really hard. I have a 2-year-old son now, and my dad, his grandpa, watches him 2 days a week. My dad is the best grandpa I could ever ask for. I am so glad that I get to see my dad now for who he really is, and I'm so glad my son gets to experience it too. Loving someone who doesn't love you back. It destroys your self-esteem and makes you question everything about yourself. No matter what you do, you will never be good enough because they simply do not love you. I used to believe that there was something wrong with me because he didn't love me. I remember stepping so far out of my character in an attempt to win him over that I didn't recognize myself. It was exhausting. Thank God that's over. A tie between my first wife unexpectedly passing away when our daughter was 3 months old, and this past fall when my current wife fell into manic-induced psychosis and spent 2 months in the hospital, not even being able to communicate in any normal sense, while I took on life and the holidays with 2 young girls myself. Both times were incredibly lonely and happened less than 10 years apart. I don't know what normal life looks like anymore. Losing a job and being out of work and on the verge of brokenness. No one does or can help you, and you enter what appears to be a bottomless spiral of void and quicksand. And getting back up or even hitting bottom is very, very tough, especially without lucky breaks or a good social system and network. And it F's you up. Even if, and hopefully when you get out of it, it teaches you great things, toughens you, and makes you much more mature and competent at life, but still, F's you up too. My mother and her ex-lover murdered my older brother by poisoning his insulin. He was in a group home at the time. The state had taken him away for neglect. He was old enough to do the injections himself at the time. My mother let him know one of the bottles was poisoned, so he knew every time he gave himself a dose from the new bottle that it was basically a game of Russian roulette. He got to the bottle that was poisoned about a month after Christmas. It killed him. She got away with it. The group home threw out his meds, so all the evidence was gone. I was trapped in the house with her from Christmas vacation until after he died because I'd walked in on her while she was poisoning his insulin and she didn't want me telling anyone and tipping them off. It was a month of pure hell, trying to get a message to anyone to help, but no one did. And now? I'm equal parts confused and outraged and horrified at this. There's got to be a way to investigate this, right? When I was 8, our beloved husky escaped and got hit by a car. I, being the big boy, went with my dad and looked for our dog. We found him dead and mangled. I then watched my dad bag him up in a black trash bag and throw him in a dumpster. I learned a lot about life and death that day. When my little brother was killed at 12 years old, he was walking with my mom when a shooting started across the street. They started walking faster, and then my mom heard my little brother falling. A stray bullet went directly through the back of his neck, killing him instantly. That's what the doctors told us, and I hope it's true. He was the only one who died in the scene. I miss him every single day, and it really effed my mental health up. You expect your parents or grandparents to die sooner or later, but not the youngest member of the family. I lost lots of friends, became suicidal, hated life and society. I'm better. Sorry. Waking up disheveled and feeling like my personal space had been invaded, with waking nightmares of being catatonic only to realize I'd been getting drugged and raped for months after my rapist described something she'd done to me as if she'd plucked it from my nightmares. Suddenly realizing I'm in peril thousands of miles from my home, realizing I might have AIDS years later and I need to get tested, and I might need to come clean to everyone I've ever had sex with in the interim that I may have caught it from the same rapist I was living with. I later came up with a negative for HIV or AIDS, but I felt like such a terrible person that I deserved it all, feeling like they were stalking me, and one day they or someone loyal to them would show up, especially if I made too much noise in the world. It took years of therapy to feel kind of normal again. I sleep. I feel safer. My flashbacks are fewer and further between. I can talk about it, but it'll never be what it was prior to 10 years ago. I mean, this is just terrible, but again, he's where he belongs and you made it out, so sorry you went through that. I'm a CSA survivor. I was 12 when it happened for the first time. I told my mom. She blamed me for it. Lived with him, touching me, emotionally scarring me, pressuring me, and living in fear whenever my mother left the house for years and years. I told my closest friends when I was 18. They didn't believe me. They believed it's only abuse if there's physical force. They couldn't believe that pressure and emotional manipulation has the same effect. At some point, when it goes on for so long, you just give up. I had no positive teenage experiences, no grand birthday parties, flirts, or relationships. I wasn't even allowed to sleep over at a friend's house because my abuser considered me his personal property. It finally stopped when I moved out. Even then, he was trying to get me back by terrorizing me with suicide threats and constant blame shifting. He made me responsible for my mother's happiness. It effed up my life. I was 36 when I finally opened up to my husband, and even though I know I am believed for the first time in my life, I still get ambushed by the fear that he might think I'm lying. It took me a while to enjoy intimacy, and I'm always wary of fathers with daughters. I have major trust issues and often read way too much into situations and simple conversations. I'm afraid of being happy at times. My husband and I work very hard to help me. I got lucky with him, very lucky. He still doesn't know everything. I need time. My mother died in 2012 due to pancreatic cancer, 6 months before diagnosis and death. My abuser still lives. I milk him for money whenever we are tight. I don't care what anyone thinks about that. He deserves my mother's fate. My ex, male 18, and I, female 19, decided to move to Wisconsin together to start our lives. After 4 months of working and arguing, I woke up one day to him yelling and being mean. He ended up choking me and abusing me and threw me in the basement to collect my things since our room was down there. I immediately just ran up the stairs and out of the house. He tried to pull me back, but I started yelling, so he let go, and he went back inside and locked me out. It was December, in Wisconsin. 8 degrees and 22 miles an hour of wind in only a hoodie, some pajama pants, and boots. I walked over a mile to a gas station in the active snow and wind. I thought I was going to die of hypothermia. When I got back to the house, all my belongings were outside in the snow, and I was locked out. He also stole over $400 and some of my belongings. After that, and I got back to Arkansas to stay with my dad, it came out that my ex had been sleeping with his half-sister, his cousin, and also a 13-year-old. Whoa. He's now in jail for sexual assault of a child. I'm so thankful I got away before he killed me, or who even knows what he would have done by now. But it is something I'll always remember, and it will always affect me. You'd think it was growing up with a complete psycho mom and sister who let her boyfriends abuse the shit out of me, or getting blown up by an IED in 2005 outside of Baghdad, or my neck getting grazed by a bullet less than 1 centimeter away from my artery, or when I spent a year in Baghdad in 07 to 08 training the Iraqi police where I essentially did their job for them. It was a wholesale sectarian slaughter every day, or getting wrongfully accused of assault after getting back and being forced to take plea agreements because no jury is going to acquit someone that just got back from a war zone. Nope, not even close. It was a couple of months later, after being married, found out my wife was pregnant. Surprise. Oh, and surprise, she has stage 4 breast and ovarian cancer, which was aggressive enough to have to start treatment in her first trimester. Got through a year of chemo, 6 months of radiation, 9 surgeries, and had a baby at the same time in the middle. We were 25 at the time. I'm still so effed up from it all. There's just not exactly a support group for people like me. I grew up as the least beloved child in a whole family circle. I had coming hostile experiences with members of my family, discrimination to the fullest. I learned how to grow up myself. My parents were absent. I encountered situations with no one to guide me mentally through it, and my train of thought wasn't always right, and that changed me a lot. I had to hear from my own mother in a fight that she prefers my brother more than me. How effed as a parent you have to be to say a thing to your kid just to hurt them. I'm obviously not the person to celebrate Mother's Day or even Father's Day, but if I had a mother to love, I would definitely celebrate that each time I could. People who grew up in a warm house surrounded by people that matter to you, cherish that.